Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Flug. I'm just going to be in the background today, but just want to let everyone know that this session is going to be recorded, and we'll be sending out we'll be sending out the actual research from MediaFly's first-party research after the webinar today. With that, throw your questions in the chat or the Q&A section. I'll be monitoring that, and I will turn it over to Mary and our fantastic panelists.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you all for joining us today. I am beyond excited to welcome the best in the business here today. So let me spend a few moments to welcome and introduce you to our panelists. First, I'd like to start with Cameron Brain, who is the CEO and co-founder of Everyone Social. Cameron's a serial software entrepreneur, a leader. He hails from Seattle, although he spent a lot of time building and developing his company in Utah, and his company is called Everyone Social. Cameron, you and I have known each other for almost a decade, I think, at this point. So thrilled to have you join. And if you could just tell us a little bit about Everyone Social and what the company does.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mary. It's always a pleasure doing anything with you and the team, and super excited to be a part of this. So thank you. Yeah, we are a employee advocacy, brand advocacy platform. So we help companies activate their people to connect and engage and share on social, and that being really kind of the most efficient and authentic way to be on social, people to people. And so, as you might imagine, many of our clients use us with their sales teams. And in some cases, in a pretty large and kind of scaled way. So salespeople becoming closer to marketing, just a lot more organizational overlap we see at our clients, and excited to get into the research today that you guys have put together.
Thank you so much, Cameron. And let's move to Whitney. Whitney Siak is probably, I think, one of the top revenue enablement leaders, practitioners globally in the world. She is a sought-after keynote speaker. She's the head of revenue enablement at Demandbase. We've had the opportunity to work together in the past, so it's wonderful to have you with us here today, Whitney.
Thank you so much, Mary. Reunited, and it feels so good.
It surely does, and this will be the first of many, I think. And hope we find ourselves in the same city one of these days, so we can have a coffee or a Chardonnay. But anyway, tell us about Demandbase. I think it's a pretty well-known brand, at least in the tech world. But tell us a little bit about the company so that everyone knows and has some context from where you're coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Vice President of Revenue Enablement at Demandbase. And Demandbase is a leader in account-based marketing software, go-to-market and sales intelligence tools, B2B advertising, and B2B data. So our mission is to transform the way that B2B companies go to market. So it's a mission that I'm incredibly passionate about, being in enablement and helping that transformation internally within our organization.
Yeah, so that's got to be so motivating for you. And we feel the same way at MediaFly because, we're helping sellers and everyone in the go-to-market team be more effective. And what could be better than that in life? So I can hear your passion. Well, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Kevin White, who is with Sealed Air, and he is one of our customers. And I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce him to you. He's Director of CRM, Sales Process, and Technology Enablement at Sealed Air. And Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do day to day?
Sure. So again, thanks for the invite. Glad to be here with everyone. I mean, I think people traditionally know Sealed Air, now see really as a packaging company, right? We have a lot of power brands out there like Cryovac, Prismic, Liquibox. My personal favorite is Bubble Wrap. Everybody's familiar with the pop, right?
Yes.
But we are kind of transitioning or reinventing ourselves into more of a product-driven, or from a product-driven company to this new era of like automation and digital and packaging solutions, right? My part of this whole role, right, is partnering with both internal, external, customer-facing leadership teams to kind of create value and leverage a lot of the expertise in the different areas throughout the business. In order to drive insights and gain some things to obviously hit that keyword of revenue growth, things like that. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. And thanks for getting the memo on the green shirt. Well done. Anyway, thank you all for that background and for being here, and thank you everyone in the audience. I think it goes without saying that 2023 has been a pretty challenging selling environment. But if you know me and any of my work well, or a little bit well, you know that with challenge, I always see opportunity, and with challenge and opportunity combined, I see lots of opportunity for innovation. We talk a lot about innovation on the technology side, and we'll certainly touch on that today, but I think it's really a time for innovation in how we go to market. And you already heard, Kevin and Whitney sort of allude to that already. So with that, let's kind of get into it. Research is one of my favorite things to do in life. And yesterday, I'm really pleased that we released our State of Revenue Enablement 2023. We'll do one of these reports every year, so you can look for it consistently. And just to give you a little bit of background, what we did was we actually partnered with a third-party research provider, Data, and they surveyed over 300 North American revenue enablement and revenue practitioners and leaders across a range of industries at primarily large companies, large, complex global brands for the most part. And I really designed the survey along with my colleague, Matt, who you heard at the beginning, to really suss out or get to the heart of what some of these new trends are in buying and selling, and how organizations that support sellers and everyone in the go-to-market team are adjusting and adapting, both from their technology strategy to process to a range of different topics. And one of the things I think you'll find, and we'll share some data today, and then certainly you all have the report after, is that the best companies now are really starting to enable not just their direct sales force, but everyone in the go-to-market organization, anyone who touches or interacts with a customer. And I see Whitney nodding her head, vigorously over there. So thank you for that support. I mean, I see a world, Whitney, and we may not be there today. I'm going a little bit off topic, Matt, so bear with me, but where you can almost see like your legal team, your team that deals with procurement getting enabled as well, right? Because everyone wants a seamless, frictionless experience, and no one on the buy side wants to tell someone on the supplier side that same story over and over again. Once you've told it, you want it to be memorialized and everyone to be on the same set of mail. So anyway, it's such an exciting time. Anyway, what we found, I'll share with you a couple of things from the survey, is that companies that are tracking to exceed their targets for 2023, and this is self-reported, but it seems like folks are being pretty honest here. Number one, they're enabling not just sellers, they're enabling everyone who is market facing. We also found that 75% of enterprise organizations are spending more than $1 million on revenue enablement, revenue technology. And we were in New York meeting with a soon-to-be customer yesterday, and they are spending multiple millions in this realm. The other thing we're seeing is that, and we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, is that companies that are exceeding or tracking to exceed their goals are leaning into analytics and content analytics and deriving insights from buyer behavioral activity. And then the final thing I want to touch on, and we'll get into this later as well, is that companies that are tracking to exceed their revenue targets are experimenting with generative AI. So both on sort of the marketing and enablement side. And, certainly we're still very nascent there, but there are a lot of things that this new technology can do to help us save time and ultimately interact with customers and prospect in more meaningful ways. And by meaningful, I mean, not this. Hello, Whitney. I hope this email finds you well and in good health. No, you've got to go in over the top and customize it, but certainly it can save, 30 to 40 to 50% of your time. So anyway, that's just a little bit of preamble on the research. We'll let you all dig into it later, but let's dive into some topics here with some of these experts. And when I was an analyst at Forrester, we spent a lot of time debating, what does sales enablement mean? And now we've kind of put that behind us, and we're talking about revenue enablement instead of sales enablement. We've undergone this shift of terminology, and I think it's important to kind of talk about why. and what the impetus for that change was. But I can tell you that the leading research firms, both Gartner and Forrester, have closed the chapter on sales enablement, and they're now referring to it exclusively as revenue enablement. And Whitney, as someone who's involved in the society that was formerly known as a Sales Enablement Society, tell our audience here today and folks on the listen back, how you define revenue enablement, and why is it important for companies to really shift their mindset away from sales enablement to rev enablement?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about this shift. Enablement in general to me is about maximizing human potential at scale. And this shift to revenue enablement expands that impact from just your traditional sellers to focus, like you mentioned earlier, on the entire customer journey and the outcomes that those engagements provide. And so it's so critical in this market, in particular for SaaS-based organizations, moved from this growth at all costs momentum and strategies to really focus on efficiency, right? We hear do more with less all the time. And customer retention and expansion, that's the group that has the spotlight right now. And so our teams, our revenue enablement teams, are agents of change within a business. And you can't have true transformation unless everyone's along that journey with you. So I am so excited to see this shift start to spread like wildfire, and for companies to be on board with calling it what it is, because I think for a while, like SEO stopped people from using the term revenue enablement. But we've been on this path for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I was actually feverishly taking notes there because I really loved a couple of things that you said, which is really thinking about it as maximizing human potential. That's absolutely, wonderful. So thank you for that. Kevin and Cameron, let's start with Kevin. Tell us a little bit about what revenue enablement means at your organization and how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, right, and here at C, I look at it as kind of the same way of like, it's not sales and service, it's not sales enablement anymore, right? It's like, how do we create an alignment between all of these different parts of the organization that are literally interacting both directly or behind the scenes with customers, whether it's sales reaching out to that, finance, HR, legal, IT, supply chain, who then responds, and then we respond back to the customer, right? It's the partnership and the operational effectiveness that if you don't have it between marketing, sales, and service, I just don't know if you're going to get to where you want to go, right? Like I have the thing of, instead of do more with less, it's drive more. Instead of doing more, just drive more, whether it's driving change or driving whatever your keyword is or buzzword you want to throw in there. But that's kind of how we're looking at it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And Cameron, I know Everyone Social works with very, very large, complex global organizations. How are your customers thinking about revenue enablement? Are they thinking about it in the way that we've just discussed, or are you bringing them along?
No, I mean, I think it depends on the client, as everyone here knows. There's nothing sweeter than working with a real visionary organization where, even as the vendor, you learn more about where things are headed from them than you're necessarily even bringing to the table. We have some clients that are very large that I would put in that category, but we also have some clients that are very small, hundreds of employees, where kind of enablement is really being forcefully driven by the CEO, which I think is a great kind of, petri dish for like what could be possible, right? There's I think challenges around kind of scaling and so forth, but I mean, Mary, our view is we as a company didn't really build a tool for one particular group. Our view is everyone in the company is connected with people that your company wants to reach, current customers, prospects, partners, analysts. I just presented today on the whole value of social as it relates to employer branding and future hiring. They're all there. Your people are all connected to them. So our view is everyone has a role to play. Of course, not the least of which is, sales and everyone directly attached with dollars. So definitely seeing it moving in that direction, but it's, still early adopter days, I think.
It certainly is. And I think that's why it's really important to have conversations like we're having today, and why I'm so appreciative of the leadership that everyone on this panel provides to the industry and the market. So thank you for that, Cameron and Whitney and Kevin. let's talk about insights and analytics and content. So the research found that companies that are actually monitoring their content consumption analytics, and by that we mean how buyers and sellers are engaging with content. When I think about customers, I think about your sales force and your folks who are actually using and getting that content quickly and modifying it according to brand guidelines and delivering it in an immersive fashion. And then on the buy side, the buyers who are consuming it, sharing it, spend time on it, going back to certain pages. What we found now, as we're in a period of pretty significant transformation, is that now only about 5% of a buyer's time is actually spent directly with a seller. I've been talking about this for a long time, and I keep telling almost anyone who's willing to listen to me that the time that the seller has to impact and influence that deal in the favor of your company is narrowing and narrowing. And as a result of that, the level of engagement needs to be so much higher. There's no mulligans really in this world. And so, that's been a very important theme and topic. But as we think about content, the way I'm starting to think about it is that content needs to do the selling for your organization when you're not in the room. And so we're seeing now from Gartner's research that the sales process is 95% of it is taking place without the seller and without the seller being in the room. So Cameron, how does Everyone Social help sellers and I guess everyone in the organization? Because you've read Dan Pink's book, like everyone's selling, right? How does it help? How does your company help stay top of mind in between those big macro milestones that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, I feel like that number puts everything in perspective, right? So like, a buyer is out there maybe looking for some things, buyers, there's no law that requires a buyer be rigorous about, looking at all the solutions. So they may be looking at you, they're probably looking at the competitors, they're spending, I think the figure was like less than 5% on average.
Wow.
And then, so you figure they're looking at 3 or 4 or whatever, you may have the exact numbers. But basically that translates to 80% of their time being kind of like a self-guided tour of, research and consuming content and things. And so I think the things that we see we do this ourselves as a company, but we see it as well with our leading clients is, they're looking at those 2 buckets in terms of how can they better influence the 80% of time that people are just floating out there, right? Content, social, like, I think it always need to be questioning, where the frontier is, because if you're doing the thing that everyone else is doing, it's reversion to the mean, in terms of performance. And then as far as that 5%, that window, I mean, we've had, and I'm sure many on this call have had this experience too. We've had, multi-$100,000 deals that really in reality came down to one call, right? One review, presentation, RFP, they take different forms, but it was a lengthy process that was very short. So how do you make it count leading up to that? And then of course, in the moment, when you actually do have that opportunity. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I love that. And we'll circle back to the concept of the on-site meeting and the role that's playing in sales cycles. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Whitney and Kevin on that and some of the trends that are happening there. But Kevin, let's go back to the analytics. How does Sealed Air approach content analytics? And, it'd be interesting sort of where you are today and what your end game is as well.
My end game. I never have an end game. No, I mean, listen, playing on part of what Cameron just said too, right? Like in today's world, and as a former seller, right? I mean, I spent years in the field. So today's world, I think people are not only looking at content analytics as we are, for 2 reasons. One is like, how do you effectively gain new customers with content in the pre-sales world, but then maintaining customers, right? Like to me, part of it is also just utilizing content to maintain the relationship. So you're not having to spend a lot of the sales reps' time. But in my mind, and the way that we're looking at the content specific back to your question, like without really good content analytics, and Mary knows this is almost like a teed up question for me, because I am a massive proponent of content analytics. As my famous phrase is like, it's the nucleus of everything. Like without really good content analytics, you can't have things like proper coaching and good marketing efforts, attribution. I mean, I start to look and think of all of the areas around sales planning and targeted promotions from the portfolio departments and all of these things that literally without the ability to know how our customers are interacting, and not only external, but I look at the internal people as customers, right? How are internal people interacting with the content and understanding what are they using and how are they using it? I just don't think you can be an agile company in today's world if you're not tracking content analytics. As far as future state, I mean, that's why I'm happy to be part of your ecosystem, right? Like I think the future is almost unknown in some of the content analytics. I think the things that are going to be available 3 years from now, we can't even think of today, which is going to be really exciting, right? For people and geeks like myself.
Yes, we will have much to talk about over the upcoming years for sure. Well, let's stay with the content topic. You know, we asked our survey respondents about what the top challenges that they had when it comes to content management. When I say content management, I mean the ability to for individuals to quickly access, modify, and deliver content, and then have rich signals delivered back to the business and to content creators, so they know what content is moving the dial and what content is ultimately contributing to wins. But you know, some of the big challenges is it takes too long to find it. You know, when I was at Forrester, we did research that found that the average seller spent about 9 hours a week trying to find content, and that could be emailing their friend or trying to pull it off of one of their devices and, you know, going back and forth. And so when you have a large sales force, you can imagine how that adds up and the lack of productivity that's caused there. But the other thing when we talk to marketers is a real challenge around enabling brand consistency, especially when you have an increasingly large distributed sales force or use ecosystem partners, right? The further and further away from you get from the epicenter, the less consistent your brand is. And then obviously there, for companies that have compliance issues, that's a huge challenge. Whitney, how do you think about some of these challenges, and how have you and your helped your teams overcome them in, currently and in the past?
Yeah, I mean, all of these hit home for me, Mary. Like these are common challenges that I feel like I've experienced here as well as at previous companies as well. One of the themes that I glean from it is actually trust in content. And it sounds like a really soft challenge to add on, but motivation and inspiration are critical for changing hearts and minds to drive adoption, right? And so when you are fixing some of these challenges, you're solving some of the trust issues that reps may have with content. And my team right now is on a mission to what we are calling shield the field. And we're cutting the noise and some of the decision fatigue that comes along with having so many options out there to choose from. And so just to be cute again, we're going back to basic without being basic. To take it one step forward, sellers are also looking for really prescriptive guidance on what content to use when. And they want proof that it leads to content influenced revenue results. And so what we're doing tactically is we're bringing our content marketing into the customer journey workshops, and we're identifying what are the value add gives that we provide the team at each stage. And we're going to be closely monitoring their utilization and their correlation to closed won deals. And I think by making your marketing teams true co-owners of the enablement content management tool is really critical to success. We recently built a vision for a 3-year roadmap maturity model, and we used design thinking principles to identify what the impact could be on a variety of different experiences, from the users themselves to managers to enablement leaders, and then to the marketing experience too. And what this does is it gives us this shared North Star to action against and truly optimize our investment.
Wow, I'm ready to just come over and come work for you, but I actually love my job here. But you're so inspiring, and there's just a couple of things I love about what you said. Shield the field, have a North Star, and build trust. I was talking with a customer yesterday, and I think their sales force has a lot of fatigue from so many different tools, so many different asks, and you have got to rebuild trust and really invest in some of the change management and show them what the WIFM is, right? If a salesperson doesn't know what's in it for them, it's very difficult to drive adoption.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So Kevin, what are some of the top challenges that you're working on with your team, and how are you overcoming them?
I mean, it's kind of the same area, right? I mean, here we're siloed in a lot of areas as it comes from a technology. We're a big company, right? And we're transforming. We are slimming down. We're trying to automate as much stuff as possible in order to alleviate the reps. I mean, I'm reading through the survey results. You're nodding your head at a lot of these things. Like, yeah, they don't have they don't have a lot of selling time. They're overly burdened on all these areas. Like, we're not collecting the correct data, or we're collecting the correct data, and we're not driving the right insights out of the data to actually drive tactical decisions. I mean, analytics is becoming this thing that's just like a buzzword, analytics, right? But to me, it's what insights are we able to pull out of it, either my team or other parts of the company, in order to drive tactical decisions to grow. Full stop. We need to be able to grow. All companies want to grow, right? And I think that's where the analytics and the ability to capture information in a way that benefits everybody, and then deliver it to a sales rep so they can go out and utilize it in their world, is only going to be beneficial. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you think about the sales rep, and that's probably a whole other webinar that we could talk about how the sales rep is changing, but you've really got to package it up in a way that it's consumable quickly and they can actually action the insights that you're giving them. So thank you for that. So when I think about analytics, of course, we can't have analytics without data. And that brings me to sort of our next macro topic here, which is, revenue intelligence. So the ability to really drive a leading revenue enablement organization, you've got to have intelligence. And so, during my time as an analyst at Forrester, it was about 7 years. I noticed over and over, and in industry as well, everyone wants to collect data. And so we're starting to see the lines between, revenue tech, enablement, intelligence are starting to blur. You're seeing, a lot of vendor overlap, and I'm sure we'll see much more consolidation in the future. But let's talk a little bit about intelligence. Our study, we found that a top challenge amongst revenue teams is siloed data, or people using different sources of data, and it's really challenging. What we found was that the top performers, or 70% of respondents from the recent survey, are actually prioritizing vendors who can provide a single data lake or a unified source of data, because the days of being able to pull and extract from different silos, it's not unnecessary. And every time you're doing a bilateral sync, you possibly have errors, right? So let's start with you again, Kevin, knowing that you have a pretty large, complex organization, and even you use multiple CRM systems, which may be the bane of your existence. But, tell us a little bit about how you're dealing with this siloed data challenge, and is it a conundrum for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I think sometimes people, when I talk to them and they start looking at the way that we do things, again, to not overly repeat too much of what I just said, a large company, right? We are absolutely in a current state where we are slimming down or transforming the tech stack, right? But in lieu of that happening, the end game, whenever that will be, we are very much siloed, right? And because of that, we have siloed data that we're finding ways to pull together, right? So that we can manipulate it offline. I mean, it just becomes a burden of how do you derive all of this information together to actually utilize it, right? Again, you can't be my favorite word of agile, because in today's world, that's literally what we all live in. And we just can't do things that I think need to be done or we're working on, because if you're taking weeks to manipulate the data, by the time you're done, you're you're not using live data. So the next thing you know, you've made actions or you've made decisions off data that is not live, right? And we are leaps ahead of where I thought we would be. And we're certainly on a really good path to get where we need to be. But yes, having multiple CRMs and a few other technologies on-prem is definitely an issue. The only other thing I'll say is what I find interesting between the survey and some of the other commentary so far is it's also interesting that like there's global data and there's regional data, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to identify that there are certain data points that have to be standardized globally with an allowance for some regional differentiation between them, right?
That's a really great point. I mean, it's the same thing in marketing, right? You have to have sort of consistency at a holistic level, but if you don't have practitioners in the field, whether it's in Asia or the continent in Europe or what have you, you're going to be missing some of the message. So thanks for bringing that in. Well, knowing that I all like to sort of envision the future, let's take a little bit of a journey. I'm going to ask Whitney to take it with me. What does data nirvana look for you, Whitney? And being really honest, where is demand based on this continuum of having clean, complete, and robust buyer-seller behavioral data?
Oh man, I mean, I wish I could fix my face because I'm sure through that last conversation, like I've started itching, but disparate data, I feel, is like the bane of enablement's existence, like you mentioned, but it is so critical in making the leap from a reactive to strategic function. And so I'm only 5 months in at Demandbase, so we do have a long way to go towards nirvana. And you heard me mention earlier, like the maturity model concept. I mean, right now, I'll take us moving from ad hoc chasing of metrics to moving to repeatable reports as a win. And yeah, I understand the need and the value here. So I actually have a dedicated resource on my team to our enablement tech stack and our analytics. And what we've done is we started with establishing like, what are the baselines, identifying what data do we currently have. And what we found is that we have access to a lot of lagging indicators. But those don't necessarily help us understand like how to pivot and adjust our approach. And so like my conference joke is like enablement needs leading indicators to be able to make those adjustments. But what we end up with is lacking indicators most of the time where we may not currently be tracking something. So the steps we're taking are to become absolute best friends with our RevOps team and to calibrate with leaders on what good looks like in a consistent way to measure that success and set really clear expectations.
Amazing. Yeah, I really love how you're thinking about that. And Cameron, I know, you and I have had many philosophical conversations over the years. You're a thoughtful person. How do you and your customers think about data and intelligence? What's on your mind right now?
Yeah, definitely leading indicators. I mean, I think our focus is, in particular, trying to shed more light on what's actually happening on the networks themselves. Our domain, of course, being social. All the tools, have been there. If someone engages with your stuff out there and ends up back on your site and fills out a form or does anything, those bits have been there, from cookies to UTM parameters to CRM, marketing automation, et cetera, to understand when they arrive on your site. But so much of we're talking about that, like, how do you influence the 80%, right? Networks themselves deprioritize content that includes links. They don't want their members to simply see everything that takes them outside of LinkedIn or takes them outside of X or Facebook or whatever. So a friend of mine kind of termed the future of, he was a huge pioneer in the world of SEO. He kind of termed the future zero-click marketing, right? So posting images, posting videos, posting long-form text. We all do this, right, on LinkedIn, and we see the results. We see the increased engagement because literally algorithmically it prioritizes that above other types of content. So I think helping companies understand, in particular sellers, understand for their given accounts, what are these people doing out on the networks? Because frankly, by the time they get to your site, or they may never come to your site or do the thing that you really wanted them to do from a conversion perspective. I think one of our clients put this best. It was Amazon. And they said, we over-rotated on demand gen the last few years. which, you know, I take that as kind of a statement across pretty much every company that we work with. They said, right now, our priority for the next year is awareness. Like, we need to reach the people. And this is Amazon, right? If Amazon has an awareness problem, everyone has an awareness problem. There's just so much noise. There's so much content that no one is ever going to see or take action on. You know, how do you effectively connect with the people that you're trying to reach? And then how do you know it, right, from a data perspective? So that's really our focus, is really working with sales teams to help them understand, of all this stuff they're putting out there, you know, how is that driving connections? How is that driving engagement? And using that as really a leading indicator for them to potentially then take action through an outreach or something more direct.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's move on to talk about growth. And, you know, Whitney mentioned sort of focused a little bit on the installed base and driving growth through the, you know, that's a very popular strategy right now when you find yourself in an environment where it's the economic headwinds you're facing the economic headwinds. The other thing we're also facing is really the increasing digitization of the entire buying and selling process. So when you read my report, you'll see that 60% of revenue practitioners and leaders now are plurals, what we call in marketing, Gen Z or millennials, right? Digital natives, folks who are very comfortable with self-discovery and engaging in digital formats. Gartner says that, you know, in the future, most of these interactions between sellers and buyers are going to take place in digital selling rooms. I mean, it's very exciting. And then simultaneously, as you think about the growth at all costs behind us and more sustainable, pragmatic growth that companies of all shapes and sizes now are embracing, it's tough for sellers. It's tough for sellers, Whitney, Kevin, Cameron. Sales cycles are longer. You've got more buyers that are involved in the process with competing in different agendas. Often they're usually distributed because no one's really in headquarters. And then what we're finding is that procurement and finance are inserting themselves early and often into deal cycles. So I want to talk about, you know, and maybe we'll start with you, Whitney, because I know you've been thinking about this probably for a while now. How has the organization that you're part of and other ones previously changed their go-to-market approach as a result of these dynamics that are full on in play?
Well, I think we're still in progress, right? Like, this year is really this transformative time where we're all evaluating, like, how do we go about that? What strategy do we want to deploy? Because if we try to approach these problems with the same strategies that we've done in the past, which is what CEOs, CROs, salespeople are familiar with, if we try to put those same solutions in play, we're not going to see the same results because this is a different beast we're dealing with, but it's a bit invisible. So the way that we're navigating this is we're watching really closely at velocity over productivity to understand, like, where in the sales process do we need to focus and where do we need to pivot? So I'd say that's the biggest strategy I have right now that's been a shift. But the other thing is, you know, taking a look at, like, how do you balance organic growth and inorganic growth within a company too? Like, there's other strategies and other levers you can pull in order to continue to hit that motion.
Really like that. And when we think about our own growth at Mediafly, we're really looking at really three primary streams, which is consistent, repeatable overproduction on the organic side, so primarily direct sales. We have a channel that we're igniting with wonderful partners. SAP is one that we can speak of. It's been a long-term partner of us. We'll be investing more in the channel for sure in the upcoming times. And then M&A, we continue to, you know, bring on companies that can increase the value, both the depth and breadths of value that we're providing to our customer base. And yes, M&A can also add incremental ARR to the business. So very, very well said. Yeah. So Kevin, talk to us a little bit about sort of this cost reduction, cost stability types of environment that we find ourselves in, and how does it translate at Sealed
I mean, you know, we've had a few conversations on this in general. I mean, I look at it. There's two areas, right? There's one in my mind, there's cost reduction, right? Then there's also cost stability or maintaining the cost, right? Overall, right? The customers are not looking, again, I'm an old sales guy, right? So customers are not looking to necessarily reduce their spend, but they're not necessarily looking to increase it either, right? It's more of a status quo. How are they going to continue to do what they need to do without having any of those variables change, right? I do have to say, going back to one of the things though about like the way we engage with new customers or even existing customers, right, is taking it out of the sellers. Again, sellers there's only so many hours in a week, right? And I'm a big proponent, my boss knows this, of the pre and post sale. Like, are we doing enough? No, I don't think I would ever say we're doing enough either way. But to me, it's the pre and post sale activities, right? Because I mean, I'll be frank, post-COVID, post now, and to what you just said at the kickoff of this section here with the digital meeting rooms, like an in-person meeting with a customer in today's world is worth 2 or 3x what it used to be, right? Because you have to find a way to get them through your content or your emails or what your conversations to be excited enough to go through the rigmarole of getting them into your building to then, in our world, in our industry, to do the analysis, to do the PVAs, to do these things. Because if you can't do the exciting part, I don't think you're going to get into the building. And in-person meetings today, I don't know, to other people are just, they seem harder. And when you get it, you feel like you've almost won and you haven't even won yet.
I know. Well, we salespeople do like to feel good. So I think feeling like you've won is a good thing, Kevin. But yeah, this is a fascinating topic. And it kind of brings me back to 2017 when I was at Forrester. And I wrote a blog and then a report following that really looked at the future of the on-site meeting. And my prediction then was the on-site meeting would have its own SKU. Buyers would actually pay for that meeting because they would be so rare and unusual, and that they would be driven by the buyer, not just a metric that the sales manager put in Salesforce. And so the salespeople actually had to deliver that metric in order to not get, in trouble in their pipeline meetings. And of course, if you read Forrester, half of what we do there is spark provocative conversations. But I think it's really interesting, Kevin, because, companies are closing 7-figure deals, and I'm not saying they're doing it without a meeting, but there may have 1 or 2 meetings where there may be 30 to 40 that are happening digitally and virtually. And how much more productive is that for everybody? I think it's actually a really, really good thing. Cameron, talk about your business. How are you seeing on-site, off-site meetings play out in your business, and what do you all do to keep the momentum going?
Yeah, well, I think some great comments here. I think we're focusing on channel for sure.
Right.
I had a conversation about a year ago with a very sophisticated hedge fund that basically just said, we're telling all of our companies, like, prioritize channel, right? That's going to, better together. Not all of us are consolidated solutions. So that's certainly, a way to kind of combat that. I think I've spent the last week and a half doing in-person meetings. And I, as a part-time seller myself, I absolutely love doing them. It does take, I think, some amount of innovation to kind of make it happen. I mean, for many of these meetings, there are existing customers, but innovation is kind of the word that comes to mind for me and for our clients in terms of really all aspects of the business. I mean, this is a period of time where everyone on this call, everyone I talk with, especially in the technology world, has to fight for survival and success. Growth is challenging, retention is challenging. We're not simply, I think, going to do that by reordering the deck chairs, right? Like, some things have to change, some approaches have to be revised. You said something in the chat, Mary, that you may be talking about something slightly different, but this to me is on the top of my mind. It's on the top of many of our customers' mind, the future of enablement being the C-suite. That has proven to be just a really, really fantastic arrow in our quiver, in the quiver of a number of our clients. If the question is, how do you get someone's attention? No one wants to talk to anyone more than the CEO. And that sounds perhaps like extremely egotistical for me to say that, but on a statistical basis, right? If you're sending outbound communications, the results have been just absolutely tremendous. So that's one perhaps little tactic that we see very successful right now.
Great comments. And I'll just sort of jump in there as well. Again, not to seem egotistical myself, but we've had to really rethink and restructure our demand gen approach, given the new dynamics that we've been talking about today, as well as many that we haven't even touched on. And one of the things that we're doing is actually, we've got a team that's reaching out to set 20, 30-minute no commerce calls with me directly. And I'm, directly involved in helping the team generate leads and opportunities. The conversation 90% of the time does not go into anything that has to do with MediaFly, but we often find a common ground, and that results in some next steps there. So yeah, really interesting to hear you say that, Cameron. And we've got to think very, very creatively in this world where it's really difficult
Yes.
to win business with standard tactics. Well, we're going to be wrapping up here soon, and I want to leave a little bit of time, hopefully, for some audience questions, but I think I'd be very remiss if we had a webinar and we didn't talk about generative AI. So I mentioned and referred to the study. We've got looked at 44% of organizations that are experimenting with generative AI are more likely to hit their targets for 2023 than those that are not. I'd love to just do maybe a quick speed dating round here on, 2 to 3 things that your organization is doing with Gen AI to either help create better experiences for the buyer, or more insights for the business, or quite frankly, save time for your practitioners. So Whitney, what are you all doing with Gen AI?
Gosh, we've been hearing about AI in our enablement tech roadmaps for forever. And I think with the rise of ChatGPT, even, we went from that being like a future thinking thing to the here and now reality in a blink of an eye. And Cameron mentioned innovation. Our team hosts Innovation Hour on a monthly basis, where we focus on net new approaches and strategies. And so we're exploring generative AI, we're identifying opportunities, creating proof of concepts, and knowledge sharing back with the group on these opportunities. Our own tool has predictive sales dashboards, which help identify which opportunities to pursue and are most likely to convert. But outside of that, we're doing things like using the Zoom recaps, the Gong recaps for action items and Q&A functionality. We're challenging our vendors to articulate their AI visions. And specifically, we're evaluating AI that impacts sales velocity, which I talked about earlier, and seller efficiency in particular. Yeah. On the enablement side, we're doing things like leveraging ChatGPT for things like ghostwriting communications, content creation, clarifying some of our instructions around activities, and then using things like Midjourney to create really unique visual components as well.
Awesome. Cameron, what are you all doing?
Well, I'm going to be a little contrarian on the topic of AI. I think there's a tremendous amount. I mean, AI, there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to change absolutely everything. In our world, outside our world, every aspect of our lives, personal and professional. I think, very often, as Larry Ellison said, the tech industry, has more trends than the fashion industry. People see things, and in particular, like, hey, I can click this button and get some content. And there's this mad dash, right? Chat GPT and generative, whatever. And that's not even like you haven't even started the race at that point. So I would just say, from a AI investment standpoint, we're thinking about it this way. We see our clients thinking about it this way. Playing a little bit longer term game. Obviously budgets are super tight right now, so making sure that you're dealing with vendors, or if you're building something yourself, you're building it in a way that is going to continue to produce value in the kind of as an annuity, as opposed to just click the button, generate the text. Because to your point, Mary, there are some efficiency gains, I think, with some of the current kind of sales tools and marketing tools and so forth. But there's one thing the world doesn't need, is less personal content, right?
I know.
Less authentic content. Like we're talking about, oh my God, it's so much harder to reach the buyer. How do we do that? How do we get them to respond to our email? Or how do we, perhaps get them to respond to a text, or engage with our content on social or whatever? The last thing you want to be doing is, and frankly, Brian Hallahan, the founder of HubSpot. I just saw an interview he did with a leading AI venture investor the other week, where he was saying the same thing. He's like, AI is not going to be about content generation. It's going to be about lots of other things. But anyways, that's my soapbox on AI for the moment.
Well, we had to have one, and thank you for stepping onto that, Cameron. And let's go to Kevin. What are you all doing now? You're in a little bit of a different situation because you're not from a provider organization who's using generative AI and embedding into their tools. But how does a traditional business like yours experiment or think about generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, first, Cameron, let me just say thank you for using the word contrarian. Appreciate the level up in the vocabulary. That's great. I mean, listen, companies like ours, at least, right? Are we looking at it? Sure. I mean, is it part of the future state of certain areas embedded in the company, similar to what Cameron was just? Absolutely, right? Meaning like customer service, customer tracking, maybe some utilizing it for some of the sales development reps or the SDRs for the initial outreach, or doing things with it that does not take away from the personal side of what we still find very, very important, right? We are a selling organization, where we will go with it, I think we will be a lagger in some of this space. And from a full geeks perspective, I love the idea of it all. Again, I think this is one of those areas where 2 years from now, if we all regroup, it'll be fascinating to be talking about where that is now embedded into how companies like C, at least, is utilizing it for a manufacturing go-to-market type plan.
Yeah, fair enough. And thank you for that lens and perspective. And yeah, appreciate that. Well, we're going to wrap up here in a couple minutes, and I want to leave everyone with a couple of words from our incredible panelists. So let's start with Whitney. If you have one final thought that you'd like to leave the audience with today, what would that be?
I think my main hope for everyone is that you don't feel trapped in doing things the way that they've always been done. Offer alternative solutions and challenge leaders who are trying to solve these market challenges the same way that we did 5 years ago. I think what really sets enablement apart as a strategic partner is being able to have those challenging conversations, to push boundaries, and to bring new ideas and perspectives to the table. So you're doing the right thing by being on this webinar to hear what's happening in the space, and stay in touch with your community to hear what's working now versus what has worked in the past.
Fantastic advice. Cameron, what piece of advice do you have for our audience here today?
Yeah, I would just say be bold. I'm going to go meet with sales leadership at IBM tomorrow. And, they've been a big proponent of social selling. They have thousands of global sales reps, and they're making some bold moves. I think this just is not the environment that is going to reward marginal improvements on the tactics and practices that we've used in prior years. I think it's time to really identify kind of where the opportunities are and do some things that other people are not.
I like that. Be bold. Well said. All right, Kevin, bring us home. What do you have?
I'm going to throw in another word, that collaborate.
Yeah.
Internally and externally, right? I mean, this is somewhat of a newer space even to me, meaning we are traditionally a sales enablement part of the wing, right? I'm working with my boss and others to grow the revenue, rev ops, all this, grow it outside of the sales arms, Whitney, right, would look at. And I think the more we can collaborate, not only internally, with your coworkers and your other departments and divisions, but I find that going outside into the world of LinkedIn and some of these other groups that I'm now joining, the amount that I can learn to then bring back to my leadership team as potential ideas to try things or kind of pivot, even the smallest change, I think, is now having a bigger impact than we realize, right, in the organization. So I'm going to throw the word of collaborate out there as the layman on the call.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Collaborate, be bold, and leave the status quo behind. Very sage advice from some of the best in the business. I couldn't have enjoyed this conversation more. And I'm so grateful to our panelists, Whitney, Cameron, and Kevin, for joining us. Thank you for sharing so generously your expertise and experience with our audience. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today, as well as for the folks that are listening in the playback. And read the report and let me know what you think. And have a great rest of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.